And we are the very, very proud publishers of this beautiful book, beautiful in every respect, which I will get onto. So today's launch is going to be Adnan Malik, who needs no introduction to any of you. He is a star. I have here 2 stars together. I have understood that there is something rather exceptional in Pakistan that I have to say you don't get in the UK, which is that the world of the intellect and literature and sheer outright glamour combines in Pakistan in a way that it doesn't in Britain. In Britain, people are very suspicious of beauty and glamour, and they think that somehow you are not serious enough. And I have always felt that's not true. I was very lucky. I lived in Italy for a year, and Italians taught me that everything can go together. But it is here in Pakistan where you truly see these things come together. So we have Adnan, who's going to be in conversation, and he, as you know, is a film and television actor, director, and producer. He's also World Wildlife Fund's Pakistan's Goodwill Ambassador, and he is an Asia Society Asia 21 Fellow and Young Leader of the World. So that's pretty wonderful. And he is going to be... He is going to be talking to Mira Sethi, who is also an actor, a famous and wonderful actor, and a writer, and she, as you all know, comes from Lahore. She's been educated both in Pakistan and in America, and has written for a lot of American journals, including the very exceptional New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and for The Guardian in the UK. She regularly appears in mainstream television series, as you all know. But what some of you perhaps didn't know is that she is a writer of fiction, a very, very gifted writer. And I will never forget reading her stories when they first were sent to me in my office at Bloomsbury, and being taken into this world, into this society that she depicts with an extraordinary grace, with a beautiful lyrical and humorous tone. She has, as I just said earlier in my previous session, it is like discovering a Jane Austen of Lahore. And I think that that is a remarkable thing. She can go into a society, observe it, and write about it in a way that is both delicious and profound. And I think that those 2 things together are really important and difficult to find. So it was with such joy that at Bloomsbury that other publishers wanted her, and that we were lucky enough to get her. And it's not just me that feels these things about her. I very quickly say that the great writer Amitav Ghosh has said on Instagram, no less, perceptive, witty, and beautifully written, these stories open unusual windows into the world of young, urban South Asians. It signals the arrival of a hugely gifted young writer. And Mohsin Hamid said, fresh, intelligent, and bold, Mira Sethi's stories open up fascinating slices of contemporary life in Pakistan. So we're very, very lucky to have her. Thank you. But just before they begin, I'm going to leave you with this. It's a really exciting thing. So I have a wonderful colleague called Faiza Khan, who took the book on with me, who used to work at Bloomsbury. She's now freelance, but she and I have other things we're hatching aside. And she brought to us at Bloomsbury the work of this incredible painter, Minaa Mohsin. And we all loved this work. We looked at her pictures, one after another. We were gasping with pleasure. There were so many that were perfect for this book, but none more so than this one, which it just somehow has the soul and the spirit and the humor of the writing. And Minaa is, as you know, a really celebrated artist, both in Pakistan and in the US as well, co-founder of Partner Painters in Lahore, and she earned, as well as being trained in Pakistan, she earned an MFA from the very famous Pratt Institute in New York, and she is here today to say a few words. So welcome, Minaa, and I will leave you to it.
Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I should come here? Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I have to express how honored I feel to have my painting on Mira's book. And I am very grateful to Faiza for having me up here. So I'm going to hold it up for people to see. So in this painting, I'm just going to directly talk about the work. So in this painting, there's a female reclining casually on a sofa. It's supposed to be a self-portrait because you can only talk about bigger problems if you use yourself as an example. In the painting, the figure is surrounded by an excess of possessions, material goods, pet animals, food to eat. It almost looks like a movie set or a window display. With an overdose of color and pattern. The idea was to show that excessiveness, whether it is of beauty or beautiful objects, can potentially become repulsive, unsettling, or even threatening. The idea of I saw it, I liked it, so I got it, that attitude of instant gratification that prevails throughout the society is only aiding to overconsumption and materialism. Hoarding, the idea of hoarding is not just a characteristic of a prior generation, it exists in us as well. We are our mothers. About the, sorry.
Can you guys hear me? So, do you mind if I say what I
No,
love about
please
it?
go
Okay.
ahead, please go ahead.
So, Assalamu alaikum everyone, and thank you, Alexandra. I don't know where you've gone for that overly generous introduction, and thank you, Adnan, for moderating the session. I am so thrilled to be here. This book came out nearly a year ago, but this is my first session in Lahore, which is my city, although I live in Karachi now. So I'm so happy to be here and seeing all my childhood friends up there. It's very, very special. One of the things that I loved about your painting, Minaa, is that we have this woman reclining, and as you said, she's surrounded by delicious things. She's also surrounded by fried chicken, which you can't see. And she has a cat, and it's very colorful, it's gilded. But the expression on her face is one of ennui, it's one of boredom. And to me, juxtaposed with the title, Are You Enjoying? Or jis tarah hum yahan kehte hain, Are you enjoying? Did you enjoy? Juxtaposed with a woman who's just kind of lying there like this, really spoke to me also about the spirit of my stories, especially the title story, which some of you may or may not have read. So I love that contrast.
Wow, great, thank you. So I would just like to end on this, that this image could be this image is actually a representation of an attitude, not just the person. It's an attitude of, as what Mira said, that it's just us these days. And it could be a glimpse into the private life of anyone at home. That would be, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for painting this beautiful painting.
Thank you, Minaa, and thank you, Alexandra, and thank you, Mira. And it's so great to be here in conversation with you. Mira is just a wonderful friend, someone I've also acted with, and we have so many overlaps in our lives now. So I was like, oh, this is just going to be like hanging out with you and all of you who know her well. and this is from your hometown. Mira, let's just dive in. And my first question really was about the title of Are You Enjoying?
Yeah.
So your book has a lot of vernacular, it has a lot of local idioms, there's a lot of local referencing from the weather to the flowers, you know, and it's all italicized because they're sort of they're the local names in Roman English. And Are You Enjoying is also kind of part of that. It's kind of a narrative around a little bit around like post-colonialism, the value of English in Pakistan. I was reading into it. I was trying to, you know, figure out why this was the title, besides the fact that it's the title of one of your short stories. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So it's basically a colloquialism. There are many of you here who obviously haven't read the book, which is completely fine.
Obviously,
because
Mira
you're
can
all
see.
going to go and buy the book and read it. But in the title story, I'm going to give it away because without context, you can't really understand. So in the title story, these two people are having an affair, and the guy says to the woman in a moment of intimacy, he says to her, "Are you enjoying? Are you enjoying, baby?" And that is the colloquialism that I wanted to introduce to a global audience, which is how we speak, you know. And it's are you enjoying without a noun? It's not saying, are you enjoying the weather? Are you enjoying the intimacy? It's just, are you enjoying? And so that was a way to take that colloquialism and kind of mainstream it.
Totally, and that's really beautiful. It actually reminds me of like, India did this in the 90s with all their MTV and Channel V stuff, remember? Like, it was, we are like this only type of stuff, right?
And postponing an event, but also preponing an event, you know?
So beautiful. So I think further diving into that idea of the local colloquialisms, and your book is full of it. So did you have an audience in mind when you were writing this? And is that part of your process?
No, I mean, I just kind of wrote these in the dark, really. I remember 7 years ago now, I wrote myself an email and I sent it to my own email address, and it was the first paragraph of Breezy Blessings, which is the second story in the collection, which is about an actress on the set of her first major TV show. So I just kind of started writing, and I didn't have an audience in mind, but eventually when this book came together and I had like an agent and a publisher, I wrote it for young people, all of you here who are not just young people, but everyone who is here today. People are interested in Pakistani culture and the way we live our lives and the secrets we have and the really complicated ways in which we navigate identity. I think for me, you were saying to me the other day, you said, you're basically just interested in relationships. And I was like, yeah. And at the level of the short story, which is a compact, small form, I think relationships are really powerful because you can kind of just magnify. You know, you could literally write a short story about a pair of missing socks. And if you write it well, it will be a successful short story. So no real audience in mind, just kind of wrote for myself. And you know, sometimes my own writing would make me horrified, and sometimes my own writing very now and then makes me chuckle. So, you know, yeah, it's for everyone.
It's for everyone. There's so many ways we can go.
Go whichever way.
Yeah, totally. So bringing in these aspects, though, do you think that you were able to connect with the kinds of audiences that perhaps were able to understand this? When we talked a little bit about releasing this book in America, because also how do you, not that one, I think we want to live in a time where we're beyond labels, you know, and especially you and I both were multi-hyphenates. We do multiple things. We don't really want to be boxed into something. But also, I mean, the perspectives here are so interesting, you know, there's feminism that's addressed in there, there's post-colonialism that's addressed in there. You are a Pakistani, but you're also third generation in the sense that you moved around a lot, you've lived around the world.
Right.
So,
I think it's a really good question, actually. I think a question that a non-Western writer has to ask themselves early on in their career is, above all, do I want to be accessible to the West? Above all, do I want to be a bridge maker? And for me to sit here and say, nahi, main to bilkul bhi interested nahi hu, would be kind of a lie. I am interested in bringing us to the world, right? But I also think never at the expense of like the intense subjectivity of your characters. Adnan, you brought up the Urdu words. There are literally words like a character walks in and says, have you forgotten all about your majazi khuda? Now, in that moment, I could have said, have you forgotten all about your God in earthly form? But hum is tarah baat karte hain? Like, no, nobody says that. And so you have to retain the subjectivity of your characters. And I think that to me was really, really important. Yes, being a bridge maker is important, but also things like, you know, when you have Western publishers, I'll give you guys an example. So for example, in a book, you will never find the following sentence. And then Mira reached for the donut, comma, a deep-fried, ring-shaped dessert. But you may find the sentence, and then Adnan reached for the gulab jamun, comma, a deep-fried sweet milk curd. Why? Why does the gulab jamun have to be explained in this way when we are living in a global community? We never tell people what donuts are like because we have consumed Western culture all our lives, right? There's a kind of asymmetry of power there. But so pushing back against stuff like that, I used a lot of Urdu words because I was like, Google is at the tip of your fingers. You can open up Google and it literally takes a second. So wo jo tha, the idea of just retaining the local flavor was very important to me.
And then what kind of, yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. And what kind of response did you then get from Western audiences? Because I think ultimately people are a little lazy. I mean,
Yes.
we were talking about what the brief, wondrous life of Oscar Wilde, and I remember reading that. And because Spanish culture is so integrated into, let's say, American culture, people were willing to sort of, you know, they knew a little bit about the culture. Pakistan has obviously been looked at it in a certain light, and you are a Pakistani writer, you're not an Indian writer, you know, you're a Pakistani writer, you're from here, so that's so important. So what kind of response and feedback did you get after taking this strong position?
I think that in the US, not so much in Britain, but very much in America, when you're writing fiction from our part of the world or from any part of the world, you either have to update the US's notion of itself, or you have to give them something that they are already interested in. Like, after 9/11, there was a bit of like a cottage industry of novels about Islam and terrorism. The US turned to us, they wanted to know. Remember we used to be called AvPac, that awful hyphenism? Afghanistan, Pakistan ko AvPac kehte the sare. And they wanted the news from AvPac, which was like, what's going on with Islam? What's going on with terrorism? How is the war on terror being, perceived in areas like India and Pakistan and Afghanistan? And so there was a community of writers that stepped up and said, okay, we will provide you answers. But I don't burrow inside the mind of a jihadist. That is not the writing I want to do. I have written about love and longing and all kinds of things around identity, but not necessarily what the market wants. And I think this is tricky. Like, is it blurry? What does the market want? Do you want to be a writer who panders to that? These are difficult questions. And so my book, I think I have received tremendous and interesting and like complicated criticism and feedback from India and Pakistan. The messages I get in my Instagram DMs from people in India has been so heartwarming. But have I necessarily received that kind of feedback from the US? No.
So at some level, all fiction writing is kind of autobiographical, right?
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Yes. So let's get into like sort of some of the stories that you've written about. For example, I forgot the name of the story, but with ZB.
ZB, okay, A Life of Its Own.
A Life of Its Own,
Yeah,
right? And I can't help but think of where, your parents or your mother, for example, right? And I mean,
Right.
you come from a well-known family, people know you where you're coming from. So how much of that kind of seeps into the writing, and how did you decide that these were the stories that you wanted to tell? And then, of course, also getting into, your career as an actor and then talking about Breezy Blessings a little bit. So, how did you decide that these were the stories you wanted to tell, and how much have you
Yeah.
culled from your own life?
So I grew up around very strong matriarchs. My cousin is sitting there, she knows. And a strong matriarch is an indelible influence in anyone's life. For those of you who have strong mothers, yes. Are there people who can relate to that? Okay, yeah. Strong moms, but they have a way of making an impression. And so, I mean, ZB is a bit of a caricature. She is not really my mother. For those of you, again, who haven't read the book, ZB, which is short for Sayyida Zarina Bukhari, is a woman who decides to run for elected office. Her husband has had the seat for many, many years, and then she says, I'm going to run for office. And the book is the story is her journey. And so, yeah, I mean, I've observed things, and then the beauty about fiction is that you take things, artificial things like plot, narrative, and then you use those artificial devices to get at a deeper truth. So I used all of that, and then I, wrote about, but it's not really like my mother, although when she read it, she was like, "Ye tumne bahut zyada exaggerate nahi kar diya?" So I was like, "It's not really you." And she was like, "But when you describe her arm, there's a line in which, there's a line in here which is, and then a brief dip in her wrist sprang into a mound of arm." And my mother was like, "That sounds very familiar."
And so getting into identity, and you were talking about identities, one thing that you really explore in your writing is the idea of how we take on identities, and especially living in this country where some of us can't live our full expressed lives.
100%.
I did see that transition happen, and we kind of walk around with the characters as they perform. There's a sense of performing. So, ZB, for example, is a certain way at home, and she's a certain way when she has to go see
her constituents.
Her constituents, yeah, exactly. And in all your stories. So do you want to talk a little bit about how we adopt identities and how that kind of came into your storytelling?
Sure. That's a really, really good question. And, in a country like Pakistan, I feel like we have so many invisible rules. So on the one hand, at the, say, topmost level, we have the abstract rules of the state, of Riyasat-e-Pakistan. And then below that level, we have the often burdensome imperatives of family and clan and aunts and uncles and parents. That's the second tier. And at the third tier, we have young people, like some of you here in the audience today, maybe like us, with smartphones in our hands, navigating these above rules and trying to find a way out. Questions of the folks who watch drama serials. Shadi kisse karni hai? Our drama serials are literally about one subject, ki shadi kara do kisi ki. And it's kind of banal, but this is the stuff we're also preoccupied with, which is marriage. And then when you skirt those rules, when you don't want to marry somebody your parents want you to get married to, how do you lie? How do you perform? How do you perform your way out of those situations? A lot of my characters are professional performers, for those of you who have read this book, and a lot of the characters who aren't actually professional performers are also performing. They're performing gender, they're performing all kinds of emotions. There's a chai boy in Breezy Blessings, which is the second story, and he develops a very close friendship with the lead actress on set. But he's the real performer because he's teaching her how to be an actress, he's teaching her adaigi. And usko nahi pata, the actress doesn't actually know, but the makeup artist who's queer knows how to perform, and so he's teaching her. So I think in a country like Pakistan, we're constantly kind of navigating these rules and trying to improvise identities as we go along. In a country where so much assertive self-expression is frowned upon, my stories ask the question, how do you be yourself when so much of our self-expression is frowned upon?
I like that. And so maybe to address Tomboy, which is one of my favorite stories, maybe we don't have to get too deep into it. I think people should really read it themselves. But there is that element of performance around marriage. There's two people who don't ultimately perhaps want, I don't know, I mean, do they want to get married? Is it a choice? Do they do it out of a safety and a security to perform for their parents? Because it is an important subject matter. I think everyone in this country is just obsessed, like you said, marriage and babies. I mean, it's the biggest business, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And 250 million people, I mean, it's interesting. 250 million people in a country where no one outwardly discusses sex. So it's worth thinking about. Do you want to just address a little bit of Tomboy?
Sure. It's a short story about two friends who agree to marry each other in order to keep their sexualities a secret. And they're basically, a safe haven for each other. There's a lot of tenderness there. Yeah. And so that's what I wanted to get at, which is that, again, when you have an oppressive superstructure sitting on top of you, which is the state, and often things like religion as well, and clan and family, how do you get to live the life you want to live? Sometimes you got to tell lies. And in those lies, sometimes then you are able to find an oasis. You're able to find that solidarity, you're able to find that safe space So I think Asha and Zarar, who are the two friends who married each other, are able to find safe haven with each other in a society where that demands quite violent conformity, because they're both into the other gender, the other sex.
And it's beautifully told. I mean, it's for people who are not so connected to, you know, an older generation that perhaps isn't so connected to what their kids really do or what's really happening in their lives. Like you said, you know, Gen Z has access to cell phones. The identity politics at let's say, at that Gen Z being 1996 onwards, are that you can kind of create your own identity. People don't necessarily say, oh, I am Pakistani, oh, I am this, I am that. Those labels don't exist. They're connected to online communities. They're connected to the things that they do that bring them together with other global communities. And what I liked was that it's a beautiful insight, and not a lot of people are creating content that really focuses on the truth of younger people. I had a friend who's just come back from New York after a long time, and he was like, you know, Gen Z here is really amazing. They just don't, you can really see they're really expressing their gender, they're expressing their sexuality, they're expressing their identity. And there isn't a lot of content coming out of Pakistan, maybe more so across the board in India through Netflix and through Amazon.
Right. Dar lagta hai na? Matlab, 6 months ago, a couple at the Lahore University decided to marry each other, and they proposed on campus. This is like 6 months ago. And after they'd proposed on campus, they hugged each other. And it's a beautiful, joyous moment.
Yeah.
And they were expelled. They were expelled for expressing public affection at a Lahore University. Why are we policing people's bodies? Why are we policing desire in this way? You know, desire then becomes political. That's also what I've written about.
Yeah.
So that is what I'm interested in. I could go on and on about that, but I won't.
No, but I want to say it's also like what is sacred? I mean, what is more sacred than two people wanting to spend time, want to be together and honoring that? I mean, these recent rules also, because we work in television, of Pemra saying that you aren't allowed to hug. I mean, how are you actually what kind of role modeling are you setting where you're not allowed to show real affection, yet you can brandish a gun, yet you can be violent, yet you can hit a woman, and those things are all okay, but actually when you're showing expression, a sign of expression or love, so it's you know, I don't know, it makes me very angry.
No, absolutely. I think you have a lot to say about that because you're so deep into this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, let's dive into the little bit of gender politics also, because I think you know, we talk the strong matriarchal figures in some of your plays. Also, masculinity is addressed, and I think masculinity is really interesting. A Man for His Time, which is an interesting piece, and how he's also creating identities for himself, how he is with his mother versus how he has to be a man for Umar, who is the head of the
sort of gang.
And how and for me, I mean, that's something that I've lived in this country and experienced a lot, where like my masculinity has to be a certain way in the public domain, and my masculinity is separate. And so what's actually happening is that the space for intimacy with partners or with family is kind of getting less space now, and actually the kind of brandishing this kind of strong macho masculinity is what's getting more airtime on television also, by not allowing a husband or a wife or two partners to hug each other or to touch each other.
Right. Why is that so threatening? Like, why is that so threatening? You know, I was at Aurat March. I go every year, and when I post about it on Instagram, नीचे हमेशा एक comment आ जाता है, आपको और कितनी आज़ादी चाहिए? ओ भाई, हमें आज़ादी नहीं चाहिए, हम अपने हकूक़ के लिए आए हैं. आज़ादी की तो बात ही नहीं है. मतलब अभी मियाँवाली में 2 weeks ago, a baby girl infant was born, and her father shot her. She was an infant because she was a girl. And then they dare to ask us, like, आप औरत मार्च पे क्यों आते हैं? You know, I mean, but that's also like, I have a lot of emotion around these things, which is like, if you try and like police people, you're obviously threatened by what people are doing. My khala, who is a writer, my aunt Moni Mohsin, asked Intizar Hussain, who passed away some years ago. He's a very celebrated writer in Pakistan. She was asking him about sort of what he's seen in Pakistan, and he said something quite amazing. He said, जब से partition हुई है, मैंने 2 चीज़ें देखी हैं. एक मुल्ला का आगे आना और एक औरत का आगे आना. And then my khala said, isn't that a bit of a contradiction? And he said, no, it's dialectical. You know, the mullahs are gaining in strength also because they're terrified of women finding their voices and finding women entering the workplace and women speaking up for themselves. So both these things are happening simultaneously in Pakistan, which makes Pakistan so interesting, you know.
I mean, I'd love to, I think we have time, we can keep diving into...
We can keep, also I would love to read it just a little bit.
Would you? Please
I'd
do.
love to.
Let's go for that.
Because I know it gets boring if you read too much, but I'd love to, for those of you who haven't read the book, I'd love to just read maybe a snippet, if you want me to.
Yes,
Okay.
for sure.
All right. So we've been talking a lot about Breezy Blessings, which is a short story about an actress on the set of her first major TV show. And so I'll read from Breezy Blessings. How many girls from good families have gone into this line of work? I'm not the type of mother who says, sit at home. Do something decent, I say. Now look at your sister. I'll marry whomever you want me to marry, Mehak said. All day I'll be left alone with this useless man, her mother said, unafraid of her own wounding anger about her husband, who sat at the edge of the sofa stirring sugar into his tea. Mehak's father did not look up. Afterward, he went to Mehak's room and took her hand in his own. Mehak looked at his hand, strewn with black wisps of side-swept hair. He smiled and told her not to worry. It was her first lead role, and there was no doubt in his mind she should take it. One day, when she won Best Actress at the Jeet TV Awards, he would give the speech. I love you, Abu Jan, she told him. She returned the director's call as her father looked on. It sounds perfect, sir, she said on the phone. I'm over the moon. I've been a fan of yours for so long. She tapped the speakerphone button. So sweet of you. And feeling is totally mutual. I wanted someone sweet, even a little bit shy. The story is a little violent, nothing serious, just a few slaps. Mehak said it would be her honor. She looked at her father and shrugged.
We want... I think that was really enjoyable. Would you like to just read one more?
I think I'm good. I think people tend to trail off after a while.
No, I think it's so good. I mean, also, the performance was fantastic.
Why, thank you.
I know those characters. I know those people. What about writing as activism also? You know, I'm looking at this book now and I'm thinking about, you know, you have such strong opinions. You're a public figure. We're talking a lot about, you know, gender and power and masculinity and the role of women. And so how important do you think that is? And you've also used humor really well. So what are some of the tools that you've used to kind of get points across without necessarily also attracting attention from the wrong places?
Abhi unhone padhi nahi hai, that's why I haven't. But the minute they read it.
But this is a good point to make. You think कि जो English में किताबें लिखी जाती हैं, वो they somehow manage to avoid the radar?
थोड़ी सी वो मिल जाती है protection, I think.
Okay.
Because of the Urdu-English divide, I think there's a little bit of a sort of conservatism and less conservatism divide as well that goes on with the languages and class, essentially.
Yes.
Right? And so, so activism, I think that, I'm going to be really honest, I think it's really tricky to go into art with a very strong, overt, activist sort of intention. I think we're all political. Like you're hearing me talk, you're hearing Adnan talk, you see what I care about. That's in me, right? That's in me, it's not going anywhere. But I don't think art should try and solve problems. I think it should, however, formulate the right questions. I think that is the sort of purpose of art as far as I'm concerned. And my gender politics came out, it's really funny. So when the book came out last year, I read the reviews. I'm not one of those authors who doesn't read reviews. I shouldn't have, but I did. And one of the early reviews said that Mira Sethi is interested in strong women. There are so many strong women in her book. Now, when I set out to write this book 7 years ago, did I think to myself, okay, I am going to write strong female characters? No, I really did not. But I ended up writing about them because I'm preoccupied with what strong women stand for and who they are and what their preoccupations and struggles are. So I think it's innate. And if you do end up doing activism via your art, I think there is nothing better. I think art is subversive. I think especially in a country like ours where you can't overtly say things, art can be a profoundly delicious, Alexandra used the word delicious for my writing, but thank you for that. But I think art can also be subversive. And I think that's where you get to be your political self. But going into it with a strongly activist kind of intention, for me, just only talking about myself, I don't necessarily do that. It just happens.
Right. And so it seems like you've written this with a lot of integrity for who you are. Like there's a lot of who you are that's kind of poured into this. And so what were some of the tough choices that you had to make and that you had to stick with? And was there any battling with your editor and with the publishing house?
Yeah, that was at the level of language. Again, like, oh my God, when you're writing, like, you're translating a sensibility. Our sensibility is an Urdu sensibility and an English sensibility. But say I'm writing about like a middle-class character like Hafiz, who is at like a Punjab University-esque student. And I'm translating his sensibility from Urdu, essentially, which is the language in which he thinks, into English. That's where all the hard work comes in. Because how do you do that, right? Then you use words like majazi khuda, because you're trying to stay true to what the spirit of the character is, but then you're also writing in English. So that is, for me, the hardest thing was, like, how do I retain the intense subjectivity of my characters while writing in a language that they don't necessarily think in? I wrote an essay many months ago in which I said I was living in San Francisco and I felt quite emotionally isolated in San Francisco. मेरी शादी हुई, हम San Francisco चले गए. बड़ा खूबसूरत शहर था, but मेरे पास कुछ करने को नहीं था. तो मैंने एक मजमून लिखा और उस मजमून में मैंने कहा कि living here means speaking relentlessly in English, communicating the clutter of my inner life in a language that houses my intellect but not my heart. So,
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that is some of the identity. Sorry. I mean, it's something that I think we all struggle with also. It's like, what is home?
exactly.
And I think that's also things that you you contend with a lot on your daily basis, in your life, in your relationships. Like, where is home and what is home and what defines home? Is that something you want to?
Yeah, home has become so complicated now also. I don't know. I love home, but home is also becoming, there are fewer and fewer spaces to be who we are for a lot of people. And I'm not just talking about people who perform a certain liberalism. I'm talking about a lot of other people as well. And so I think love home. James Baldwin, the American author, said, it's a spiritual disaster to pretend that you don't love your country. And I think it is. And he said, you don't take your roots and plant them somewhere else. And I think he's absolutely right. But I think I'm also undergoing a kind of epistemic crisis, because I love home and I show up at Aurat March and I'm honored and delighted to be here talking to all of you, and I have my dear friend who's talking to me, but then I go back to my drama serials in Karachi and I get an awful regressive script and I say, ki ye aurat ko kyun maar peet? Why is she being hit in this drama serial? And they say, aapko nahi pata, ye bikta hai. This is what sells. And I'm like, but can we get beyond that? Are you perpetuating the violence, or are you responding to a demand in the audience that wants to see violence? Hum TV now has a rule that says that you cannot show a woman being slapped on television.
Great.
Good.
That's amazing.
We need more of this stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so this is what I struggle with, and a lot of people are like, ab aap itne kam drama kyun karti hai? And I'm like, because jo scripts aati hain, a lot of them are problematic. And so now I've found refuge in comedy. Ab main comedy ki taraf chali gayi hu, because comedy is at least, yay for comedy. It's not so problematic.
It's interesting. Also, you come from a family of, writers and performers, and
yes.
and who've used comedy really well, including your aunt, even your mom. I mean, your dad has the tongue-in-cheek thing going. So what is the role of comedy in expression now that you're also acting and doing more comedy there, and in your writing, which also has a lot of tongue-in-cheek in it?
I think again it's performance, right? Real versus real.
Yeah.
Comedy can just take the edge off. Like, you can say a lot of harsh things by using humor, and people sometimes won't even know what you've said. So comedy is a really good way to kind of gently kind of say difficult things. And everybody in my family is a performer, which is also a problem, because it gets tiresome after a while.
Yeah. I also just want to address, a lot of people ask me why I don't act very much anymore. And I get that a lot. No, but it's the same thing. It's the roles. You just don't have roles that are progressive. Like, as a man, I did Sadke Tumhare, which ultimately I didn't know I was playing Khalilur Rahman Qamar as he is. I played Khalilur Rahman Qamar, right? I didn't know that. I didn't know that this was Khalil. Now you ask me about his mental state, I get it, because I played it. And I went into serious depression after that, by the way. It took me 2 years. I started seeing a therapist. Like, the power of what that man is carrying and that what came into those words, like, really affected me profoundly. And then I did a drama with you.
Which you never talked about.
Which the best thing that came out of it is our friendship. And that made me realize that I really don't want to be a part of the system that's perpetuating stories where people don't really care about what the messaging is. You know, and I was like, oh, all the men's roles require a certain kind of misogyny.
Yeah.
You know, and I just don't even want that to be a starting point.
Totally.
I don't even want that to be the arc. I think there's so many other things. And then Cake came around, and that was beautiful because I got to, you know, play. Thank you. I got to play a Christian male nurse who's silent and quiet and supports the woman that he loves and supports the women in his life. And I was like, oh, this is what I want to use my platform for, you know. And then I got to play in Churales, even though I played a negative character, is because I really supported the content.
Right.
And so, but it's tough as an actor, like you're saying, you're also transitioning perhaps more into comedies because people like us, there's such little space, and after a while I can't separate who I am from the work I'm doing.
Yeah, totally. That contradiction becomes very glaring. Like, you know, on the one hand, I say all of these things, and then if I go and do these complicated and compromised roles, then that is a problem. Even playing Gulapa in Chupke Chupke, you know, a lot of people loved that role, but she was toxic. And she was so beep toxic. Like, it took a toll on me as well. And then I said, and also the way they sell it to you is they call you and they say, बहुत अच्छा role है आपके लिए, कर लें. And you say, क्या role है? बड़ी strong खातून है. And you're like, अच्छा strong है, लेकिन क्या negative है? नहीं, shades of grey. बहुत ज़्यादा shades of grey है, आपको बहुत मज़ा आएगा, boss कर लें. And whenever they say shades of grey,
I just think of 50 Shades
एक
of
producer होता है who's like the head honcho, and I'm like, shades of grey, तो इतना negative होगा, इतना ये toxic खातून का role, और वही हुआ गुलापा के साथ. और you know, in चुपके चुपके, those of you who saw it, everybody was doing comedy except गुलापा, who was like, ये क्या हो रहा है? निकलो यहाँ से, उससे तुमने शादी नहीं करनी, निकलो यहाँ से, दफा हो यहाँ से. That's all I did.
Yeah. Thank you, Mira. Before we open up to the audience, and it would be great if you guys had questions. What's next in terms of writing? I mean, you know, is there something else that you're writing? Where do you want to go with it? What have you learned from this experience? And is there a shape? Is there something forming for the future?
I'm actually exhausted, so I'm not going to write at least now for several months. I may be writing, like, can't really talk about it because it's like in its early stages, but maybe writing for the screen with a creative collaborator who I really like.
Wow.
So yeah, I think that's something that feels more energizing right now than writing a novel, which feels like for every one person who reads a book, 5,000 people watch a TV show. So it just feels a little like I'm not going to do that immediately. And
content-wise, is there?
Just comedy. It's early stages, so
right.
More comedy and light stuff. And have you guys seen Made in Heaven, that Indian show? Yeah, so I really love that. So I love the texture of that. And again, that's something you probably won't see on terrestrial Indian TV because Modi, but something you might see on Amazon. And so
why are we not collaborating on this?
You and I? We can.
Hello. Amazing. Okay. So just wanted to open up the floor to questions that you may have. You can just raise your hands, and I think a mic will go across.
That's Mira Sethi, I think, is raising her hand.
Yeah, of course, please. Back there to Miss.
Mira, why don't you write a play script, a drama script that would have the kind of powerful women characters that you would like?
जी मेरी उर्दू में बिल्कुल रवानी नहीं है मैं बर्गर बच्चा हूँ अगर आपको अभी तक नज़र नहीं आया तो उर्दू में बहुत मुश्किल है मेरे लिए honestly I would love to I've thought about it and I've often thought I could maybe sit with someone like B. Gul or Amna Mufti it may happen in 5 years but immediately I think I just don't have the confidence to write in Urdu. जी translated translation is a whole other thing but yeah it's something I think about a lot.
Is your novel based on real characters or you just made up the story?
So it's a collection of short stories and I'm inspired by the people I interact with. So in the story Breezy Blessings, there's a relationship between an actress and a makeup artist / chai boy. And after I shot my first TV show, I mean, I became very close to the makeup artist because they're always hovering around you with their brushes and they bring you all the gossip. And so then I went and wrote a story. It had nothing to do with what actually transpired on set, but the character of the makeup artist stayed with me, and so then I wrote this short story which was inspired by him, but the plot of which was entirely made up. So that's sort of my process. There's a lady here. I think you have to switch it on, either of you.
I read your book, first of all, and I read it in one night.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't that big, but it was quite addictive. One question, that when you write, obviously people around you, your friends and family would know that you write.
Yeah, thank you.
So people around you, your friends or family would know that you write. Are they afraid of you कि किताब में ना लिख दे या कुछ ऐसी बात ना सुन ले या उसमें mention कर दे हमारी किताब में? Are they afraid of talking about things, intimate things in front of you?
Oh.
Or gossip in front of you, family gossip or any other gossip?
I once read a quote somewhere that said that writers are like wolves. They pick on their own families first.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think, us lihaz se, I don't think there's like, no, I've never encountered that. Yeah, like I think maybe my dad once said to me, you know, he came up to me and he was like, so I hear, he hadn't read the book and he was like, I hear your mother's a character in this, you know, she's sort of, there's somebody loosely, main to nahi hu na. And I was like, no, you're not that you don't lend yourself to that kind of thing. I was very polite. But I think family members are always worried about being cannibalized
Of course, yeah.
in that way. And some of my friends have, but it's done with a lot of affection, so far.
So just another thing, sorry. Would
Yeah.
you sign my book after the session?
Yes, I'd
please?
be
Thank
delighted
you.
to sign
Thank
your
you.
book. Sherazad wants to ask a question.
Thank you both for being here and conducting this. I'm so happy to be here. I will take the liberty of asking 2 questions. So the first one, I would like to know, as a female writer, how do you find the space and the time in your life to write? I mean, alluding to Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, I can't help but think about that. And secondly, I would like for you to tell us a bit about your upcoming show, Pakistan, which is a comedy special. And I can't wait to hear about whether or not you contributed to the writing process, how it came about, because we've never seen something like that on television. And I'm so happy to see that your character and Amanullah are taking space that belongs to them. So, yeah.
Cheers. So Pakistan, for those of you who don't know, is an upcoming comedy which is going to start in exactly 2 weeks on Jab bhi Ramzan shuru ho raha hai, Pakistan will start. And in it, I am actually playing a character that I wrote and devised myself about 5 years ago. Her name is Zubeda. She is the house help. I wrote this character for a sketch comedy I did, and then I took it to Hum TV and I said, I want to take her to television. And she kind of speaks like this. She says things like, Man to shaag hi nahi hai. घर पे वो पूछते हैं कि ज़ुबैदा मेरे ऑलिव्स का जार कहाँ चला गया तुमने तो नहीं मेरे ऑलिव्स खाए and she said ओ निक्के निक्के बेर जे मान तो शौक ही नहीं गा सारे मैनू आके पुछते रहंदे हो आपे जाके फ्रिज च वेखो हाँ मैं तानू लभ गई हाँ एक मेरे को सवाल पुछते रहंदे हो सारे ते ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜ਼ੁਬੈਦਾ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੈਗਾ ਅਮਾਨੁੱਲਾ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਦੋਵਾਂ ਦਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਹੈਗਾ ਆਪਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਆਪ ਟੀਵੀ 'ਚ ਲੈ ਆਏ ਆ ਪਿਆਰ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖੋਗੇ ਟੀਵੀ 'ਚ And the other question about when I find the time to write. So I think for me, the battle is very much between my extroversion and my introversion. I used to think I was like a total extrovert, not so much after COVID. Turns out I'm quite like an ambivert. I need time off as well. And so for me, it's not so much about not having the time to actually write. It's like I love being with people and I love the energy that I get and that I hope I'm able to also communicate. And then once that's done, I like want to hurry home and process what has happened. That is very much my process. And that's how I write. It's not so much, oh, I'm going to take the next 4 months off and not do a drama serial. It's like, I'll do a drama serial and then I'll like, my mind will start ticking. And then I'll come home and I'll just start writing. And I'm not a structured thinker. I think via free associations. That's also how I write. I write and then I go down a rabbit hole and I'm like, oh, this is what the story is about. So I don't necessarily think in order to write. I write in order to think. The writing is what leads to the thought. And Mohsin Hamid is standing here, and he's a very different kind of writer. He's also, I'd just like to, he's like our senior and somebody I've been very inspired by. And when I read his work, I'm like, oh, wow, you really know what you want to say. Like, I hope one day I also know what I want to say.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to ask a question? Anybody?
I think there's a gentleman at the back.
I need to ask you, what do you enjoy more, writing fiction or doing political pieces? I remember you writing a brilliant profile of the former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. And why have you given up on political writing?
Because there are a lot of other people in my family who take up a lot of space. And I think that they should take that space and I should do other things. That's one of the reasons. I also found it quite tiring. Like, I found fiction much more enjoyable. But thank you for your kind words about that profile. I'm proud of that profile. I wrote it in 2014 and it took up like 6 months. And yeah, I'm not that Mira anymore. I don't do political journalism anymore, but that's what it is. Yeah.
I think I'm going to ask the last question perhaps. Who is usually your first reader?
Oh, good question. My first reader, it's a carousel, it changes. Somewhere between my husband and my brother and a couple of friends from college who read English literature and are sensitive readers. And they're all they come to it in very different ways, and so it's very helpful. Ali, like me, his literary sensibility matches mine, so he gives me advice that I'm like, really on board with. And my husband is an economist and he says, there's too much fucking backstory. I don't want this backstory. Like, can we stay in the present? Can you please make this interesting? And then my college friends who are like, that's really pretty. I love that. So I have, a range of people.
Hello.
Hi.
I've been told that the volunteers are low priority, so I waited till the end. Sorry. I don't know if you can tell, but I too am a fellow burger. So I read Manto in translation. So when I was reading your book, there was a feeling to it. Like, I wanted to ask you this. It was very Manto-esque.
Oh.
No, I mean, like the way that you write, you want to write something candidly and make it naked. The way that Manto did, even though there is maybe some difference in it, but Manto was a more used to write more about the proletariats and you're slightly slightly different class. So I wanted to ask you if your inspiration, or like in your writing style or the way that you write your stories, comes from Manto.
So that's incredible that you love Manto, and I agree with you that Manto wrote hard truths, and he also wrote about the ugliness in our lives. And I love reading Manto, but Manto was not my primary sort of inspiration, influence. There's actually a British writer who I adore. His name is Alan Hollinghurst, and he's written this book called The Line of Beauty, which came out in 2004, and it's set in the 80s in England, and it's about the Thatcher era, and it's about sort of class and politics, and there's a conservative government coming to power. And in that book, there's a pursuit of beauty, and then there's a lot of anxiety and comedy in order to get to that pursuit of beauty. And that's something that I'm more interested in. And so that's actually my favorite book, The Line of Beauty, for those of you who haven't read it. It's a beautiful, beautiful book at the level of the sentence. There's a lady at the back.
Do we have time for more? Yeah, one.
Hello. I was watching last night and I saw that you did your graduation from Wesley's College and in English. So I was just wondering that was it always on your bucket list to write a book, and what inspired you to put your thoughts into words, and was it Wesley's input in there as well?
Was there, sorry, whose input?
Wesley's College input and your major. Did that help you in doing all that thought process? And was it always on your bucket list to write a book and promote your thoughts into words?
Thank you for that question. I was not happy at Wellesley. I spent 3 years there. I spent my junior year abroad. And it's interesting that you asked this question, because the only thing that gave me succor and made me cheerful were my writing workshops. I remember putting on makeup before going to my writing workshops, and I remember my roommate being like, "You're so weird. Like, you're going to a writing workshop and you put on lipstick," and I'd be like, "Yeah, because I just love this writing workshop. I love this community." And that's where I remember once reading one of my pieces, and my professor, after I read the piece, she said, "You're definitely going to be a writer, but I think you're also going to be an actor," after I had finished reading my piece. This is like 10 years ago. And so yeah, Wellesley was a lovely sort of incubating kind of space for me. I didn't do an MFA, but then I yeah, and so Wellesley, and then I just started writing. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions, or one more? Are we okay for time? We have to wrap it up. Should we do a last question? Or
Okay, let's do a last question.
anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Am I audible properly? Okay. You talked about two of the queer characters in one of your short stories as being a sort of safe haven for each other. So I'd love to know what do you think about literature as a safe haven for those who don't see themselves represented?
That's beautiful. That is so, so beautiful. And can I just, yeah. That is absolutely why I write.
Yeah.
To see and to be seen. That is it. You know, that is the main impulse is, do you feel these feelings? When you read somebody's story or you hear somebody's story, even on television, they refuse to be unknown to you. You know, these are Cheryl Strayed's words, the lady who wrote Wild. And this idea that once you know somebody's story, they refuse to be unknown to you. It's so powerful. It's so powerful. And then these queer characters in my book who have found safe haven in each other. You know, this is in a society like ours where, as I said earlier, assertive self-expression is frowned upon. What are the islands, what are the safe spaces we are creating for ourselves to be able to be our fullest selves? You know, who are the people who give us courage? Hilary Mantel is a British author, and she said something that moved me to tears. She said, for me, life is not about who gives me hope. It's about those who give me courage. And my whole life, like, I am inspired by those who give me courage. Adnan gives me the courage to be vulnerable. I have learned so much about vulnerability in my friendship with Adnan. You know, and other people in my life give me the courage to be other things. And I think that is why we write, to see and to be seen.
Mira, thank you for that heartfelt, wide-ranging, insightful, beautiful share. Lahore clearly loves you. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, everyone. This has been wonderful.